Hi there, this is Fergal McGarvin from VisibleThread, and we also have Don Taylor, Vice President of Business Development from Calibre, with me. First and foremost, sorry about the glitches so far on the call. We had some audio difficulties on our side, but we're all set and we'll get going now. I'm delighted to welcome Don to share his experiences around how he learned from adoption of the product in the context of his proposal development team. Don's got a wealth of experience and good insights to share around the good bits and the bad bits around what it takes to deploy tooling. Don, if you might just move it to the next slide, I'll just talk about some operational notes. Again, apologies on the delay in starting. So we projected that we'd last about 40 minutes here. We'll try and keep it to a 30-minute call to respect your time. I appreciate everybody's attention. Some of my support staff and colleagues will be on the call to address any questions, and we would ask you to use the question facility within the GoToWebinar pane. That said, the main event really is to hear what Don has to say about his experiences in real terms about deployment of VisibleThread over the last 6 to 9 months. And I'll just share a little bit about the agenda in a moment. So Don, if you might move it to the next slide, that would be great. So intro to Calibre, Don will share a little bit about their background, what kind of work they do, which federal agencies and so forth. He'll also talk about the motivation for why they chose VisibleThread, some experiential notes around deployments, and he'll also talk about the lessons that he certainly has learned and picked up from the experience. So with that said, Don, over to you, and sorry again about the delay in actually getting going. Don, are you still with us?
Yep, I'm here. Thank you, Fergal, for the opportunity to chat about what we've learned with VisibleThread. First off, I am Don Taylor. I'm thrilled to be here. Second, I'm not speaking in an official capacity for Calibre, but we certainly have learned a lot, and we're very happy to share it with VisibleThread's ecosystem. And it's a pleasure and opportunity and an honor to be able to share. 2 seconds on Calibre. We're a very vigorous, thriving company of about 750 folks that do a variety of consulting functions in the Department of Defense and state government and commercial concerns. Here's a little quad chart that will give you an overview of what we do. It's a wonderful little company. If you do defense work or if you do environmental remediation, we're your company. So feel free to look us up and learn more about us. So let's turn on to VisibleThread. What motivated us? As I mentioned, Calibre is a growing company, and as we looked forward, we saw that we were going to be writing a lot more proposals than we have been writing. And it was apparent to us that the process we're using wasn't going to scale as well as we wanted it to. And our senior managers that were very good grammarians were getting very annoyed and distracted at all the grammar they had to check. So we were missing opportunities to check meat because we were distracted with stuff that should have been fixed before. So the idea is, can we do more proposals at less cost that are easier to read and easier to score? And ultimately that would turn into perhaps more wins, but it would certainly turn into less frustration. So that was the big picture. Calibre finds itself, as many companies do, with a very smart functional analysts that know their business, software engineers that are great at writing code, and process specialists. None of those folks are necessarily really good writers. So we found that our ratio of smart technical folks to really good writers really weighed in balance of the smart technical folks. So we had an opportunity to improve. Our approach has always been to support those folks with policies and procedures so we all know what we're doing and who's supposed to do it. We have a common set of shared tools. And we always want to improve with repositories and lessons learned. So that was our approach. And despite all that, we still thought that there was room for improvement. We are at our core a company of analysts. So the idea was if we could bring some tools to the process, and tools are a very big deal for technical folks. There's a measure of merit that says the more tools you use, the more advanced you'll be. So just on the surface of it, we knew intrinsically we should be using tools to what we were doing manually. And I've hit on these. The goal ultimately is to increase wins. But I can't guarantee that. What I can guarantee is that our readability should increase and our cost and time spent non-value activities should go down. So more readable proposals for sure, lower costs, absolutely. And if we build on that, then the next proposal gets even better. So we call it a virtuous cycle. And Calibre's got 3 principles. 1 is always tell the truth. 2 is do the very best work you can. And 3 is always innovate. So using tools and automation to our proposal process fit in nicely with our 3rd principle and who we are. Due diligence. So we looked out to the market and did an assessment of the tools that were out there. We're in a competitive industry. We knew our competitors were using tools. So we did our assessment. I was not a part of that assessment, but I was pleased with the results of it. VisibleThread was adopted. My sense for the criteria was that ease of use and industry acceptance were important. Cost was important, but maybe a little less so. And there were other issues. We're not comfortable using cloud facilities for our proposal work, so it had to be an on-premises, and 2, it had to be compatible with our basic technical architecture. So with these criteria, VisibleThread passed all the gates. We got in touch with our rep, brought the software on board, and did our first rollout. Our first rollout, the way we approached it was to give the tool to the folks responsible for enterprise corporate support. We thought that just made sense. This is an enterprise tool for us. Let's give it to the folks that are providing our other enterprise-related services. Yeah, not a bad approach. And then we followed that up with a few meetings saying, folks, we've got this new tool. Here's a little highlight about it. If you want to use it, get in touch with the corporate staff that have access to the tool, and they're happy to get you going. We thought that was sufficient. And what happened was a little different than what we thought. This is what we came face to face with. Nothing. There was we had 1 or 2 uses. They were okay, but when I looked at the rate of proposals that we were running out versus the rate of adoption, it was clear that we were not being met with the adoption rate that we were after. So at that point, management says, folks, we're spending money for a license. We thought it was a smart thing to do, but we're not seeing the kind of traction we want, so what are we going to do about that? And we had the usual questions. Can we do the same thing with other products? Who's ultimately going to be in charge? Do we have the right governance structure for this, and what's our end state? So we collected our wits, thought our way through it again, and came up with our second approach to implementation that said, let's change things up a little bit. And what we want to focus on is, instead of letting this be the providence of our corporate staff, let's give it to folks that are actually responsible for the proposal, our line staff. So that was one change we made. 2 is we said, let's give it to somebody that's written a bunch of proposals and put them in the mix with this tool. So I guess maybe it's an evangelist that knows the proposal process who's in a proposal team. And 2, when we use examples to everybody else, let's use in-house examples rather than generic examples. So that's what we did. And the results were much, much, much better with the second one. So let me show you one of the things we did. The rules of the road. I'm going to drag over our user's guide. Now, the VisibleThread user's guide itself is wonderful, and I at first thought that we should not do our own user's guide because VisibleThread's user's guide is lovely, easy to read, a lot of white space, good stuff. But when we did our own, I realized I had it wrong. This is a very good document. I'm just showing you the first page. And you can see what we're saying here, that why are we doing it, what you're going to get out of it. We're saying it's easy to use. You log in, create a folder, upload your documents, click the action buttons. And then a couple ways to get going. First, you're reading this guide. 2, go to VisibleThread's website. A lot of good stuff there. And lastly, contact us. And here's the URL for the tool. So just by creating this one page that has some 13 pages behind it that we probably stole more liberally than we should have from Fergal's good stuff, this really helped us because folks now saw that we had branded VisibleThread as our own. So I recommend you do that. And if you only make it a one-sheet document, that's good. Alrighty. So that was broad support. Let's talk about a specific proposal. So the application here, we knew we were going to take 4 separate turns of the proposal, and what I did was load our proposal documents up into VisibleThread, and I ran the quality reports 4 times. I did it before our red team, after our red team, after red team recovery, and then finally. And then I put those metrics that VisibleThread provides right here. And as any user knows, and if you're new to this, on the plain language report, it counts your long sentences, it nails you for use of passive voice, and it flags bad words. And everybody chuckles over bad words, but there's good words and bad words, and so all that works out pretty well. And you probably can't see my notes, but since this is new to us, in the footnotes, I defined what those 3 things were. Long sentences, essentially anything over 25 words. It's an arbitrary standard, but it's a standard. Passive voice, we know what that is. And bad words were things that were problematic, could introduce liability and contract risk. Cliches and text that nobody wants to read. So those were bad words. And you can see in every case, Calibre got better with every turn. And that was good. We had fewer long sentences, we had less passive voice, and we had fewer bad words. And then I took this scoring, and I turned it into, I normed everything for a norm of 1. It's some statistical mumbo-jumbo here. But what it allowed me to do was to create a nice little line chart for all the visual learners there. And it just makes the point that VisibleThread helped document our progress and improvement through color reviews. And we particularly did one other thing with VisibleThread besides using it to track us. We used it to, I sat with one of our editors, and we actually went through every occurrence of a bad word in our proposal, and you see how that line drops precipitously? That's because we had VisibleThread open in one window and our proposal in another, and we just went through one by one and whacked them. And the proposal became better to read. It had fewer cliches, and you can see the improvement we made. So it was a tool-driven improvement. So this helped folks get comfortable that this was a usable tool. If Don could do it, then anybody can do it. And we all like metrics. And point I made to our senior leadership was, folks, if during the gate reviews you simply ask the proposal manager to give you the VisibleThread metrics, that's pretty much all you have to do to encourage use. It doesn't matter whether you use them or not. You just have to ask for them. And the act of asking will make the proposal managers get to the proposal writers to use the tool. So we're not there completely, but we're making good progress. I've already covered this, our user's guide on the right. You can't see that grayed out area on the left, and there's a reason for that. These are all the proposals that we've got in there now. We will eventually clean these up and get rid of the ones that we've made progress on. But the point is, we got a lot of proposals in VisibleThread. If you had looked at it at the end of our first review, you would have seen 2. So we've gone from 2 to a whole bunch, and we're getting more all the time. Bad words, here they are. It's a bit arbitrary, and at the catalog level, you can make whatever bad words you think are important. We always get assure, insure, and insure screwed up. So here it was nice to have all those pulled out together. You can see we fixed ourselves here. But that was nice for us. And by doing these bad words, getting this stuff straightened out, our senior editors, our senior leadership that look at the final documents before they go out, they're no longer distracted and annoyed by typical mistakes that functional experts make that don't have the awesome, prodigious command of the English language that we all like. So let me slide one other thing now in. This is the new VisibleThread report that I just ran a few seconds ago, and you can see how easy it is to get the metrics. They're the same metrics that I showed you earlier, the same metrics that have always been produced. It's just darn easy now to pull them out. They just jump out at you. Long sentences, they're expressed as a percentage of total. Now, some of those long sentences you're going to keep because you've got contractual boilerplate. Leave those alone. Some of those long sentences come because you have bullet lists, and for whatever reason you don't want to make it a bullet list, you brought it up in a sentence. Leave those alone. But other ones are just, pedantic, gaseous windbags of sentences, and they need to be shortened up. So you can identify those very easily using the VisibleThread interface. It just flags them for you and color codes them, and you start at the top, skip the ones you need to skip, and whack the ones that need to be whacked. And then it counts your average sentence length there. That's nice. There's some standards for readability. VisibleThread has picked 25, and they have a good academic reason for that. I think it's as good a number as any for what's too long to read. But you want to, a lower number, all things being equal, is better than a bigger number. Passive voice, 3 or 4% is good. In this case, we got to 0, very impressive. And then there's a readability score on the far right that is a combination of sentence length and multi-syllable words. From my view, that's an arbitrary readability index. But at least it's consistent, and when you use it over your proposal's life cycle, it's a good way to make sure you're making progress. I wouldn't say there's an arbitrary standard for readability that you want to hit for. Above 30 is nice, but I've had some that were in the single digits that were just good as is. But it's a consistent standard, and that's what's good about it. So that's the new report. And I wasn't that terribly impressed when I read about the new report, but when I saw it, I thought, all right, that's handy, that's useful. So that's the plain language report. Now, what the VisibleThread folks are thinking is, Don, there's so much about VisibleThread that you're missing. And I have to agree with them, because this is new to us. There's an awful lot of functionality in VisibleThread that we're just starting with. For example, we're just starting to build compliance matrix with VisibleThread. And if you use any of the FedWinOps, GovOps sites, the one from Deltek has the ability to generate a compliance matrix. That's actually, as you know, sourced from VisibleThread. So we're getting everybody to do that now. It does give you a rough starter compliance matrix. So I'm not showing that in my pitch because we're just starting that. It's very good stuff. VisibleThread also has the ability to give you some sense of how consistent your writing is, your response is to the PWS. That's good. We're just starting to explore that yet. A lot of distance still to go there. So yes, there's an awful lot to VisibleThread, and like my personal brain, I'm only using a little bit of it, and we're using only a little bit of what VisibleThread can do. But I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that just means there's a lot more opportunity for us to get ROI from our investment. And we're thrilled with it so far, and we've just scratched the surface. So my observations here, I can say without any doubt that use of VisibleThread is helping us improve the writing and reading quality of our work. It's great stuff, and the more we use it, the better we get at using it. The quality of our writing has helped. I argue that if it's easier to read, it's easier to score. Now, what VisibleThread's not going to do is if your proposal's off the mark because you don't understand the customer requirements, VisibleThread's not going to fix that. If your cost proposal is for $1 billion and the customer's budget is for $1 million, VisibleThread's not going to fix that either. So the tool will help you make your work readable and decrease the amount of time it takes to do that, and that's important. But obviously there's a lot more to a winning proposal. So VisibleThread is just a part of what you need to use to make winning proposals, but it's an important part. Easy to use. If I can do it, if Don can do it, anybody can do it. It is essentially as easy as after it's installed, you sign in, you upload it, you click on your options, you react to what it tells you, and you go. So that's nice. We've got our own user's guide. As I mentioned earlier, that helps proliferation for us. Your mileage may be different. And then also for lessons learned, I'm encouraging our senior reviewers to, as I mentioned, to ask to see the VisibleThread metrics. Not that we're going to hold a team to a standard, but what you measure is what you can manage. And if we don't measure it, we can't manage it. So we're going to see more and more proposal writers being informed that their leadership is going to look at the VisibleThread metrics, and I think that's going to encourage a lot of good behavior. Lastly, when we got back in touch with our VisibleThread rep, he was full of helpful advice for us, and I don't think we took appropriate advantage of our VisibleThread support. So we did that. The website is also terrific. We went and I personally watched before I started this journey. I went and watched a lot of their very amusing and digestible 3-minute videos. That's about the length of my attention span. So I like their quick videos. They're very helpful. And so those were our observations. A few users' notes that, and the brief I've shown with you here is exactly what I've shown to our folks internally to get them on board. So what I'm showing you is exactly the same thing I've shown everybody inside here at Calibre. And I think I've covered my material. So let me pass it back to Fergal.
Hey, sorry for cutting across there, Don. So super lessons and experience that kind of you talked about. My thoughts were to basically give a couple of quick use cases. So I know that you're, from a deployment standpoint, you're kind of at this stage of adopting the tool for the most obvious benefit, which is kind of clarity of message. Are you on track? Will the reviewer be able to understand your proposal? Will they fall asleep? Will they mark you non-compliant because the content is too complex? Will the SMEs, will you lose the message and so forth? And that's a huge benefit. And I think in our experience, a lot of what people are doing is then going to kind of level 2. And level 2 for us is using very quickly the idea of dictionaries and so forth to validate win themes, to validate are you on message, to validate your differentiation. So one of the big benefits that we've released in 2.10, and we did a webinar about 4 or 6 weeks ago on the 2.10 capabilities, was both the ability to create the reports that you've shared some of, which has been well received, but also the ability to very quickly come to a dictionary that you can use for differentiation by importing from Excel. So that kind of capability is really, as you and we engage on the journey of adoption, and for anybody else on the call, the easiest protocol, I think, is to kind of bite it off in little snippets. Bite off readability, get the clarity of message improved, then go to the next phase of, right, now that we've got that sorted, right, it may be clear content, but are we actually speaking towards the requirements? Is the government looking for, a certain capability or technical differentiation, ISO standards or whatnot, if you're in the IT space, or security or electromagnetic conduction, whatever it might be, and validating that your multiple snippets that are going to make the proposal actually reference that. so that you will be compliant. So that's an important thing. And of course, you did mention the compliance matrix capability. So we'll certainly engage with you, Don, to kind of help that process as well, and look forward to that. Well, look, thanks so much for sharing. There's been a lot of great questions coming through. So what I might do, Don, if you're okay with this, is I might kind of just pop out a few questions to you, and most of them are around your experience. And let me go ahead and do that if that's okay. So the first question comes from Dawn, who's asking about how many prime proposals does Calibre write in the calendar year? It appears that they have no dedicated proposal staff. Is that correct? So I'm not sure if that's correct or incorrect, but maybe you might address that, Don.
Yeah, we probably do less than a few dozen primes. So, you know, under 20 a year. And we do have dedicated corporate staff that support our proposal process. However, what we don't have now is we don't have a shop that is responsible for lifecycle proposal development. Calibre's model is the folks that do the work are the best ones to help capture the work. We're a delivery and sell and deliver model. So while we do have corporate support, we don't have dedicated. We don't have a large dedicated proposal shop. Now we go back and forth on that, and as we grow, all of that may change. But at the moment, we do provide corporate support for proposals. They're in charge of the final production aspects of it, and they play an important role. But we don't have a dedicated proposal development shop at this point. But that may change downstream.
Great, thanks so much, Don. Kind of an adjunct question to that then is, are you aware of what the business justification was in the original cycle to senior execs to adopt the tooling? Was it an efficiency play? Was it a increased pWin play? Was it a combination? What was your sense on that?
Yeah, good question. I wasn't involved when the original business case was made. So I can't technically answer that, but what I can say is the motivation is clear. We wanted to reduce the frustration that we felt that we saw in the review cycle, and we wanted to improve the quality of our writing. So I would say it's certainly an efficiency play.
Okay, great. Here's a question from Joseph. It's to you again, Don. Did you down select immediately to VisibleThread, or did you test drive a couple of others too? Now, I'm conscious that you weren't involved in the original selection process, but if you have any insight on that.
Yeah, let me take a pass on that. I'd be speaking out of turn.
Okay, no worries. I will say from our experience, it is reasonably common for people to find the solution and to almost sole source it because there aren't too many competitive offerings around. There are a couple of offerings that are kind of copy-paste, let's say, you know, measure of clarity, and you have to copy and paste from one source to another, but there aren't, as far as we're aware, there aren't solutions that will take a Word doc as is or a PDF as is, do the analysis, give you the reports almost immediately with no friction. That's, I think, the big difference. But there are some utility tools out there that will analyze readability and analyze clarity. Okay, cool. Here's a question for me, which I may have to kind of give a slightly fudgy answer on. What percentage of the current VT user companies, in other words, our customer base, are small businesses? And what percentage are 1 billion or greater annual revenue? I would say the breakdown is probably 50-50, possibly slightly more the 1 billion or greater, but certainly a strong minority would be small businesses, SMEs, so sometimes services-disabled companies, sometimes right down to, you know, 20, 30 people shops. Okay, here's a question to you, Don, from Tim. Don, does VisibleThread work with all versions of Word and Windows?
Yeah, that's a more of a technical question. that really ought to go to our VisibleThread architects. We certainly had no problems with it on our end, and we were able to upload documents from multiple versions of Word, so we had no issues there.
Okay, great. And I suppose I kind of wanted you to address that because I think Tim was addressing the question to you. But yeah, let me say from our standpoint, we support all versions of MS Word and PDF, so there's no, going right back to the old days with .doc and .docx and so forth, so there's no anomalies there. Joe is just thanking you for sharing your experience, Don, so thanks so much. Would you please explore some of the other advanced uses for VT, such as vetting proposal language for potential legal issues raised by certain words or phrases, increased performance risk, etc.? And this is from Hunter. I'm guessing, Don, that's not a question that you probably have a whole lot of insight in, vetting proposal language for proposal or potential legal issues, or have you guys looked at that at all?
Hunter, that's a good question. No, we haven't, so let me bounce that one back to Fergal.
Okay, so Hunter, I know you and I have talked about this before, so thanks so much for spending time with us today. We have a number of examples of this, and in fact I wrote a blog post. If you check out the blog, I think it was either the last blog post or the one before, where we talked about a customer, not yourselves, but where they're vetting for legal risk. They're looking at keywords. They've got a lexicon of approximately 100, 150 key phrases and words. They categorize them accordingly. They run that against the proposals to actually yield the report. So the big benefit of reports in version 2.10 is that you can just do a straight run or kind of an analysis, upload your doc, do an analysis, choose the dictionary, and bang out a report in about a minute. So it kind of gets it off your desk, and it, as kind of tied in with Don's previous point, it's not so much that people will action the results, it's that people are doing it. So Don kind of cleverly uses the fact that they need to produce reports as a way of getting adoption because he knows that net it's beneficial. By running the legal dictionary, by producing the report, by sharing it and actually reviewing it in a collaborative environment, that equally, my sense is that in and of itself is a big benefit because you're wiring into the process a systematic vetting process or checkpoint. Hunter, if you want to kind of talk offline, I'd be happy to kind of engage and we can kind of share more detail on that. The other thing that we're getting a question on, so in terms of the tooling, Don, you've characterized Calibre as a company as quite technically driven and very metrics oriented. How did you find the reaction, or how have you found the reaction with subject matter experts receiving these reports, or is that something that you're seeing, and are they receptive to a report around their writing or their lack of good writing?
That's a good question. It is very new for proposal section writers to be given an analytically objective generated scorecard for their content. And I know that because I've run a lot of folks writing into our instance of VisibleThread and sent them back the metrics. And folks are always surprised that, one, we have the tool, two, that technology is available, and three, that somebody is doing that to their work. And you can anticipate the gambit of reactions to, wow, this is great, to don't do this again. But in general, this is all good stuff. Everybody wants to do better, and we simply need to be helped and guided in the direction to betterment. So speaking of the broad brush, the adoption is terrific. Folks understand. Once you explain to them what the metrics mean, what the goals are, writers want to do better, and they want to get hammered less in the color reviews. And so between just an innate instinct to do better and two, a desire to have less pain at color reviews, the adoption is good. Folks just need to be shown the way, and it pretty much solves itself once you get going.
So it sounds like Don, that the big deal here is that as long as you put a context on the reports with the receivers, rather than just saying, look, banging out a mail and just sending them over to those people, as long as you put the context around that, possibly by going down the hall and kind of having a quick chat, or somehow kind of put it in context, that's the key of the success. Would that be fair?
Yes, right. Context is important. A quick anecdote. So I was asked to help rewrite a section that needs some help. I did that. I sent it back to the proposal manager. The proposal manager took what I wrote on their own. They ran it up into VisibleThread. They ran the readability metrics, and they sent it back to me and said, Don, you didn't improve it very much. And I thought, this is great. People are now using VisibleThread to have informed arguments or discussions about what we're doing here. So the first time that somebody used VisibleThread against me, I knew I had won.
Phenomenal. Yeah, super, super. Excellent. Great. Well, look, actually, interestingly, I'm getting a final question here. Why didn't, it's an interesting question, and slightly provocative, I guess. Don, it's to you. Why didn't Calibre management dictate, and it's a very strong word, dictate VT usage? And I feel you've addressed that, but I'm just kind of curious what your thought on that, even just the question and the way it's raised.
Yeah, a fair question. And Calibre has a strong military background, so you might think that, my gosh, if anybody could do a hierarchical management directive, it would be a company like Calibre. But that's not actually our culture. We've got standard processes. We're ISO certified. We've got multiple CMMI level certifications. We're CMMI level 4 for quality. So we're very much a process-driven organization. But we typically wouldn't mandate the use of a tool until we had sufficient experience with it to, one, prove out its worth. So I think we approached it with a little caution. We wanted to drive it down the road before we mandated it. Two, the only real mandate here at Calibre is to be successful and do wonderful work, make yourself and the company look good. And we will grant, a certain amount of flexibility as to how we get there. And we've got our core principles, we've got our business objectives, we've got our standard processes. We all understand and use those. But flexibility towards the goal is not a bad thing. And getting experience under your belt before you mandate a process is also prudent. So for all those reasons, I'd say that's probably why we didn't announce an edict that said you will, you must. We simply encourage folks, and now that I think we've got a better approach to rolling it out, adoption's happening, and I think we're in good shape now, and we did that without an edict and without all the unintended consequences that edicts frequently produce. So a long answer to a short question, but a good question.
Great. One final question for you, Don, and we'll finish up in a moment. This is from Don, different Don. Are your VisibleThread licenses assigned to specific writers, or do you provide access to writers via kind of a, do you kind of turn people on or off as you need? Don is curious about how you manage your license pool.
Yeah, I will have to defer. Our licenses are managed by our IT staff, and they do a very good job of that. So the actual license management protocol they're responsible for. So I can't give you a good answer on that, but we've obviously figured out what works for us. And I would just say work with your VisibleThread rep and figure out what's best for you.
Perfect. Great. Well, look, thanks so much for your time today, Don. It's been fascinating insight to how you both failed and succeeded with your deployment. I think it reflects a lot of what we hear anecdotally as we work with our clients and customers. So really fantastic information, and I hope it was of some use to everybody on the call. So with that, we'll finish up, and really appreciate your attention, and we'll be posting the slides and mailing people with links to both the slides and the webinar recording in a couple of business days. Okay, thanks so much, and have a great day.